Hello,
Yeah.
my name's John Ennis, curator producer at Journeys in Design, and we're sailing around Scotland with Salvage 2020, mooring with an eye to coastal communities looking at sustainable art, design, and industry. So Journeys in Design Material World series focuses on different materials through heritage and the prism of contemporary design and culture. And we seek to reach out to those elsewhere as well. So today we've come right round the country, and we're on the east coast of Scotland, and we're able to look out across the North Sea to our European mainland partners, and in particular today to the Netherlands, a very exciting design nation. We've been fortunate in Journeys in Design to be able to nurture some relationships, and we've worked with a number of different folk in Holland, with Piet Nienke in 2014, with the Textile Museum in Tilburg as part of our linen stories, and most recently with Helena Loermans, who's a Dutch weaver based in Portugal. So it's a particular joy for me today to welcome on board designer maker Nienke Hoogvliet. Nienke, hi.
Hi, that was perfect.
Oh, thank you very much. You've been coaching me, so thank you for that. So yes, you're in your eponymous studio, and that's in The Hague. And just a little revision on geography. So just past the Hook of Holland, dips down to Rotterdam, giant port, and up via Delft to Hague, The Hague on the coast again. So you're near the coast.
Yes, that's why I'm living here.
And that's why you're there. Quite right too. A very good reason. And tell us a little bit about the lie of the land in The Hague. What's it like?
Yeah, The Hague, I just love it for the beach, actually. It's not a very interesting city, but it has a beautiful beach and especially dune area. It's very relaxed. I would also say maybe a modest city.
Nice word, yeah.
A bit boring also. Design-wise, there's not a lot happening, but I love it for the nature. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sensing the calm as you describe it, and maybe that lets you be the designer that you are. And I must say, congratulations on the extent of success and coverage and intriguing projects that you've been involved in. In fact, we met, first of all, at the Dezeen Day on the ground conference in October last year, the first of their wonderful meetings. They're the world's most influential online design magazine. And I was able to have a quick chat on a couple of occasions with Marcus Fair, who set it up, and tell him about Scottish design. But it was particularly memorable for three presentations for me on the day. One from Paolo Antonelli, who of course is lead design at MoMA, who I'd heard in New York speaking. And she was talking about her triumph really at the Milano Triennale, and she was reporting on that. And then a Dutch designer, Richard Houten, and I probably pronounced that badly, but he was talking about an extraordinary project to entirely recycle the seating at Amsterdam at Schiphol Airport. And it was a very punchy, memorable presentation. And the other presentation I was really entranced by was yours. Really a fascinating presentation. The reason that we've been able to come together today around about seaweed. Do you want to, I think it was part of the Postplastic panel that you were speaking. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that day and that experience?
Yeah, it was an amazing experience for me to be one of the speakers on such an important event, and with speakers, yeah, like Paolo Antonelli, it's amazing. So that made it also a bit nerve-wracking, I think.
Sure.
But I was very happy to be able to share my story and to raise awareness for what alternatives there are if we stop looking at plastics. Yeah, it was a very special day for me.
And that was the key message of your talk and of the panel. So it's that post-plastic need to have a look at how we can design our way a more sustainable world. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your contribution and that debate?
Yeah, I shared some of my projects, but I think the main focus was on the Seaweed project. because it's I have a big project around seaweed and how to create yarn and natural dye from seaweed. It's not a bioplastic, so it cannot replace plastics, but it can replace synthetical textiles like polyester or stuff like that.
Fantastic, yeah, and we'll have a little chance to chat about seaweed in a moment. I think we've mentioned one or two Dutch designers, and really Dutch design seems to punch very high in the world. We'll come back to that in a moment. But a little journey in design of your own. You were born near the beach. It's always been part of your life.
I was actually born in Amsterdam, but
right.
then I grew up in The Hague. So I grew up pretty close to the beach. And my parents, they took me to the beach almost the whole year around. So especially during the storms and the rain, I think that were the moments that I really enjoyed, because the feeling of freedom somehow is amazing when you're in nature.
And feeling the weather.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, it's wonderful to feel the force of nature at times. But early on, when we've spoken before, you were talking about how it wasn't always the clean beach that you were aware of.
No, exactly. So at some point, I was in art school at that moment. I discovered how much plastic waste there was lying on the beaches here. But the beaches, they are often cleaned because it's a very recreational area.
Okay.
So they are often cleaned, but still there was so much plastic. So I thought, this cannot be right. How much does there have to be in the ocean? And that's when actually my whole sea-related work started.
Well, and that's fascinating, and it has been moments like that as I've spoken to other practitioners and thinkers and curators that has galvanized them into a whole change in their career pathways. So Rotterdam Art School was your first base. It was your base to train.
Yes,
and not too far away, but Rotterdam, a much bigger place.
Yeah, a much bigger city and a nice art school. I did a department called Lifestyle and Design. It's a very broad education, so not only based on design, actually not based on design, but more into trend forecasting, branding, concept development. So I was a bit the old one.
Because you developed, I think, fairly quickly a notion that design and textiles were something that interested you. So do you want to tell us a little bit about how, in fact, you set up your Nienke Hoogvliet studio while still at university?
Yes, I think it only took me a few months in art school until I realized that I wanted to have my own design studio and wanted to make my own work. And also during art school, I learned how design can be a tool to communicate my idealism or my even activism to the world, but in a nice way, not shouting, but really raising awareness. Yeah.
Amazing, and I think that something about your approach to that is very much let's just do this thing, let's just do it, and I feel that when I speak to other Dutch designers. So there you were, you really carving out a definite path to yourself within this within the art school, looking at materials and making, and training up in that?
Yes. Well, the good thing about this education was that I was very much able to create my own path. So I had to guide myself in the direction of textiles, which I did. But the actual training, or maybe I think I learned a lot after starting my own business. So the main focus came later. Yeah.
And so that making materials and textile sensibility, as you were, if we can talk a little bit about the actual setting up of a studio, that's often a collaborative experience and a recognition of different skills and different folk taking different roles. Do you want to tell us a little bit about where that left you with the studio?
Yeah, well, I started the studio on my own, but on the background, my partner, Tim Jongerius, my boyfriend, he helped me already a lot with more the technical aspects of design, because I was not trained to be a product designer. Yeah, at first he helped with that because he is an architect.
Right. It was lovely to meet Tim recently and to hear he was at Delft TU and doing architecture training.
Yes. So he has all the, skills and the insights that I don't have. So at first our collaboration started out more on this, what I lacked, the qualities that I lacked.
Sure.
But now we start to, I think for a couple of years now, we really start to see the value in collaborating completely. So
from the first conceptual,
from the first moment on, do the concept development, do the research and everything together. So he's becoming more and more part of the studio.
Fantastic. But it was very interesting for me to hear when we were speaking before, the recognition of the skills that you had and the skills that would be more helpful to add in to the mix. And I think that's, obviously part of the success of how you've been moving. So there we go. And as you success has I mean, I must say, would recommend everyone to jump into your website. It tells a beautiful story. It's very well met within the internet visions, and you have expanded the team a little bit as well. So it's not purely, again, you've looked at what else might help forward the different projects. What other folk or who else have you brought on board?
Well, we worked a lot with interns over all the years, but now a very important part is also that we not just keep the materials inside the studio, but we are bringing them to the market. So, for example, for the seaweed yarn and dye, we are now collaborating with a business partner called Anne Boermans, and we have a special company for just the yarn and the dye. So we can develop it further and bring it to the market.
Fantastic. So that industrial experience, or the small scale batch industrial production experience, then now part of the team as well. So that's very exciting for me to hear how a studio develops and links in with the success. Again, I have to come back to this notion that Holland, the Netherlands, seems to be a really incredible, an amazing ability to nurture designers. Do you think there's something about that, or what do you think might be around that, if that's a fair comment?
Well, I think recently a documentary was released called It's Dutch Design. It's a documentary about what is Dutch design. And one of the people who is interviewed in the documentary tells a story about the British perspective on design and the Dutch.
Okay, here we go.
So he said, if in Britain a tree falls down over a pond or a small river, the British would think it's a romantic thing to look at. They would enjoy it, they would appreciate it, while the Dutch would think, oh no, there's a tree in our pond, it's disturbing the flow of the water, it's not practical, we have to remove it. Okay.
So a very different perspective. And I think that's a very interesting one. And it's funny that that's stuck with you. So that's called It's Dutch Design, I think you said.
Yes.
That's a recently released documentary.
Yes, and I'm also in it.
You're in it. Fantastic. Yes. Great. Well, look, I look forward to tuning into that. But that's very interesting. There's something about, I don't know, nostalgia and heritage that weighs down design at times in some places, and including in Scotland at times. Whereas the Dutch are just get on with it, move it, let's get on, let's do it. So that's sort of that very active engagement with the solution. Now, I think Scotland is really an exciting design nation in not quite catching up with Holland, but in drawing on structures that do nurture designers here. And I'm looking forward to stronger links between Scotland and Holland, Edinburgh and Eindhoven, wherever it happens to be. And so it's a lovely opportunity for us to meet you today and to discuss things. Now, we were talking, and we've recurrently mentioned seaweed, and that's become our material focus in the second week of our Salvage Scotland 2020 voyage. Would you like to introduce us to the See Me collection that you have developed?
So the first object that I made was the See Me rug. It's made with seaweed yarn, so 100% seaweed based yarn. And I knotted it by hand in a discarded fishing net. So for me, this is a way to tell the story of how the ocean is polluted now with plastics, but why we should take better care of the sea and the oceans, because it's also a resource for many new and sustainable raw materials like seaweed. So it's trying to raise awareness on a positive way. So after I made this rug,
which I have to say it takes center stage on your website. It's very beautiful, and it's a lovely story that unfolds with it.
Thank you. Yeah, so after I made this rug, I wanted to continue the research on not only the material, the yarn, but also on the dye, to see how you can make a circular process. So how can you fully use the seaweed? And I looked into using seaweed as a natural dye, turning it into bioplastic, and using up all the elements that are there. And that's when I made the See Me collection. That's a chair, a table, and bowls.
And so that's those three products hang together very importantly, the chair, the table, and the bowl, the vase, because it's a fully circular economy of seaweed with it. Do you want to describe that complete use of materials for us?
Yeah, so the seating of the chair, it's made with seaweed yarn, but you only use a part of the seaweed that, just a part of the seaweed. So the pigments, for example, they are left over from the yarn making process. And then the pigments you can turn into a natural dye. Then you have some organic waste left that can be turned into a bioplastic, and the leftovers from the dye bath, you can turn it into a regular paint for wood. So yeah, you use everything.
Fantastic, and it's a really, again, a very engaging presentation. But it's that degree of commitment to, well, what are we left over? What can we do with it? Can we avoid waste here and certainly avoid harm? I think in particular, I was very interested in the natural dyes coming from seaweed. There's a tradition of that around the world, including in Scotland. We use lichen and seaweeds as heritage dyes. But the concept of these being industrially available and non-polluting, that's a big challenge. And, you know, the dye industry within the textile industry, is making huge efforts. The dye industry is a particularly difficult part of that, so it's fascinating to hear of your efforts there. And maybe we can just think about where location-wise this journey with seaweed has taken you, because it's not purely the very near shore that you've been looking at. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, one of the first trips that I made for the seaweed research was to Ireland, to Galway, so the west coast. It was amazing because there's so much seaweed.
Yeah, there is. And a big tradition of using it. Food, fodder, medicinal projects. I mean, there's a great tradition, and cookbooks based only on seaweed originally from there as well as in Scotland.
Yeah, it's beautiful. We should really use seaweed more often in everything, I think.
And tell us what were you actually doing in west of Ireland?
So I was looking at which seaweeds grow there and how it's used there now. There are some seaweed farmers there as well that we've been in contact with, just to see how, what are the processes? Is there waste? Can we use that waste? and also to research the different types of seaweed that we don't have here in the Netherlands to see what kind of natural dye color they give. Yeah.
So there'll be a difference, of course, according to species of seaweed itself.
Yeah, it's quite different.
Fascinating. And then from Ireland, you've been elsewhere?
Yeah, I've been to Taiwan, which was very far away.
For sure, yeah.
Very different type of ocean, so different types of seaweed, which was also fascinating. And then also more in Europe, in France, of course, the Netherlands in different areas. And everywhere I go on holiday, I just have to search for seaweeds.
It's your obsession. I have a little bit of that going on with linen and flax fiber with another project. I can't not think of it sometimes. But yours, and by association, we're going to be seaweed too. So it's exciting to be thinking about future projects. For those who don't know the geography, and I didn't before you told me, you're now working closer to home on some islands close to the coast of Holland. Tell us a little about that project.
Yeah, so we have a few islands, and one of the islands is called Vlieland. It's a pretty small island, but there's a festival every year for music and art. And a few years ago, they invited me together with artist Claudia Jongstra to
Claudia, really a huge internationally recognized artist with these amazingly big installations and very engaged with the organic look and feel of things. So that must have been a fairly special invite.
It was very nice. Yeah. It was a very nice collaboration. And also because in this project, we completed each other, because she researched the dye plants of the island, like the on-land plants.
Okay.
And I researched the colors of the seaweed around. So together we could create this full, like color map of this area.
What a beautiful idea. And that must have been and that festival, will that continue? Work?
No, not at the moment. But
and I guess it's fed into your work going forward.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And what about that notion of all of us facing a different sort of challenge with the COVID-19 pandemic? Is that affecting your work in any particular way?
In many ways. But I think one of the most important things that it made me realize is we already wanted to do the production of the seaweed yarn and dye as local as possible. But because of the whole COVID-19 situation, it only became more clear that local is maybe a good solution.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, look, I'm not going to give the game away by talking and describing more of your wonderful products, but absolutely recommend everyone dips into your website and looks further afield. It's been absolutely lovely speaking with you, Nienke. Thank you very much indeed. And I hope very much that I may get to the dunes in the Hague, and that you may get to Scotland one day, and we can meet together on the ground, and perhaps as we go forward with salvage year on year and our seaweed projects develop, that we might be able to enter a collaboration with you and with the Netherlands once again.
I hope so too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye.